Hello, listeners. I apologize for the delay in bringing you this episode on SuperGiant Games' Pyre. It was originally scheduled for December 24th, 2020, but a combination of miscommunications and real-life distractions had this one arrive a few weeks late. Also, the numbers are mixed up. Episode 268 last week is called 269 in the audio, and the reverse is true for this episode. That's my bad. Sorry for the confusion. Thank you for your patience. Here is episode 269 of Retro Encounter.
Welcome to episode 268 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and I am returning again with our SuperGiant Games panel for the third episode in this miniseries, starting with Eva Padilla.
Heyo.
And Alana Hagues.
Hey, what's up?
Well, what's up is that I have spent the past week or two as a post-apocalypse, mid-apocalypse, barnstorming basketball prisoner player, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. For the podcast, this episode is all about Pyre. That's Pyre, the SuperGiant Games 2017 title that is about a group of exiles who take part in rites to try and escape exile and return to the metropolis that's definitely not a utopia, high above the mysterious landscape they live in called the Underside. I'm sorry, no, not the Underside. The Downside is where they live, and the Commonwealth is the metropolis above. I guess starting with you, Eva, well, just first impressions of Pyre. How did you feel in the early goings playing?
So the first things that you notice, I think, are the colors. Like, it has a very striking color palette that really draws you in. And then you notice that it's kind of like a visual novel, and then you go into the gameplay, which is, like many people have made this, even the developers, highly reminiscent of NBA Jam. The first time I participated in a riot, I was laughing. Like, there was just a lot of joy there, because it was so new. Like, wow, I don't think I've really done something like this in a game. It's very silly and very fun, and I'm interested to see where it goes. And there were some interesting places, yeah.
Oh, this game goes interesting places, and I'm not just talking about the locales within the Downside. I mean, it has been a dream of mine to play a sports RPG with customizable special moves and players and equipment and everything. This is something that definitely vibes with me to a degree. But Alana, how did you vibe with Pyre overall, especially your earliest impressions?
Oh, well, yeah, I think the first thing I noticed in particular was the way the characters speak and the way they address you. Two things really about it. Pyre, there's not a lot of English dialogue or voiced English dialogue in Pyre. The only character who consistently speaks in English is the voice or the speaker, or here's another name later on, the one who conducts the rites, basically, the one who commentates on them. And I found that really exciting, especially when you've got, like, you know, as Eva said, it's kind of like a visual novel, and one thing that visual novels tend to do is they tend to only voice the first line of dialogue or like a character quip or like a common phrase, and all of the characters in Pyre, they don't speak English. They speak a fictional language called Saurian, I think it's called, and that immediately added this like otherworldly flavor to this really unusual game and this really unusual setting, and I kind of fell in love with it straight away because everybody, like, they were recognizable voices. Like, you've got the normal over of like SuperGiant VAs, but it just made it feel, it added to that strangeness, but I found it very warming and comforting. And I love the language that the characters use as well. So, like, it's very, the immediate religious undertones and the like, because of, the reason your character, the reader, has been sent to the downside. I don't think we've explained the downside itself yet.
No, we have not. I've thrown terms around, but definitely haven't explained much what's surrounding them at all.
Well, I mean, the game doesn't necessarily go out of its way to explain them to you, but you can, like, highlight the words and read, because there's a lot of terminology you have to pick up on. You know, you're the reader, you know, the rites themselves are, you know, it's kind of a religious term full of connotations. There's the Book of Rites, there's, oh god, you put on raiments, which are religious garbs, and there's a lot to do with language in this game that is really, really fascinating and really, really my kind of thing. And I was like, all right. And then you just put a, like, basketball game in the middle of it. I'm just like, yeah, sure, all right, we'll go with that. But
yeah, it's not just that. There's a lot of sort of religious imagery and sort of post-apocalyptic story elements surrounding all of this. But I mean, you're also basically a traveling basketball team playing other traveling basketball teams, and you can even look at standings and records.
Yeah, right.
And they affect who makes the sort of the tournament match at the end.
Right. Yeah, it's not even like the first sports RPG ever, though, is it? Like, because the Mario Tennis games on a Game Boy are like RPGs, but this is so different. Like, I mean, Greg in particular, in an interview, they were worried, him and Amir Rao were worried that people would associate it with sports too much, but it just kind of became part of the natural dialogue of that game, and it fits, you know, it fits. Like, even Logan Cunningham calls it, like, NBA Jam crossed with Oregon Trail, which is really the easiest way you can encapsulate it, even if it doesn't capture everything.
This game is difficult to explain what it is without, you know, combining terms of many other games, which is something that I don't love doing, but will definitely resort to anyway. I think it's basically a storytelling game, a narrative game with elements of RPGs, visual novels, and sports games, but without really permanently living in one of those three spaces. And speaking of Amir Rao and Greg Kasavin, I am going to share an anecdote that I know I've told Alana before. I think I've also told Eva before, and probably have said on the podcast before, but it bears repeating. I went to E3 for 4 years in a row, 2016 to 2019. And my very first E3 meeting in 2016 was with Greg and Amir for Pyre. And it was my first E3. I didn't know what to do. For RPG Fan, we always attend E3 in a group of, I don't know, around 8 to 10. And someone, one of the group leaders will sort of settle the meetings and give people assignments for interviews and such. And I did have my list of interviews, but I also just looked at the entire schedule that we had and just recklessly sent out I don't know, 6 or 7 emails to a bunch of indie studios that might have been E3 asking if they wanted to talk about their games, just because I wanted to try to do something on my own for my first E3. And I got maybe about half were no replies, and some were sorry, but we're not attending, or sorry, but our schedule is set. But SuperGiant Games replied to me and said, we have openings this morning and this morning. We can meet with you briefly for one of those times. So I accepted. And 2 other of our RPG Fan staff, Steph and Peter, whom you both know, joined me for that meeting. And my first E3 experience was less than an hour after walking into the convention center, playing a 2016 build of Pyre on a laptop. And Greg Kasavin and Amir Rao could not have been nicer. Inexorably tie Pyre with my first E3 experience and my RPG Fan mini career, because it's become personal to me over the years. And I bought Pyre when it came out on Steam in 2017, but only messed around with the beginning and didn't fully play through it to the end until earlier this week. So I'm glad I got there. And yeah, this game is as weird and as special as I thought in that original preview that I wrote 4 years ago. Let's back up a little bit again. We know that there's a metropolis called the Commonwealth and a sort of a prison land called the Downside. If you're committed of any crime in the Commonwealth, you can be cast downward. And because it's basically a religious oligarchy of sorts where literacy is forbidden, a lot of people get thrown to the Downside for teaching people to read or being in possession of a printing press or a lot of books or similar. And that's why you're in the downside. The player character is the reader who, and because like literacy is an uncommon skill, all of the teams that are trying to use the rights to return to the Commonwealth need a reader to read the signs and read the stars to guide them to the next location of the rights. And Oregon Trail and NPA Jam. The exploration segments are the reader guiding your little caravan around a truly beautiful world map that is extremely color specific, as Eva mentioned a minute ago, and sort of making Oregon Trail like decisions like, oh, do I search around for an item in this space, or do I like study and reflect in this space? Do I take the north route or do I take the south route? Just like very simple decisions like that affect your resources and some semi-random happenings to your team. But ultimately you challenge other teams to these basketball-ish rights, and if you win enough of them or win appropriately time your wins in them, you can every so often you can send one of your teammates back up to the Commonwealth. And eventually there's story happenings surrounding this that complicate things. We'll talk about those in a minute. But this game is a balance of like meeting your companions and interacting with them in a visual novel way, recruiting new ones, and sort of rewarding them with freedom at certain parts of the story.
It's more of a game of two halves, isn't it? Like the first half of the game is you making your way to Mount Elodial, which is where the liberation rites take place. But along the way, you do still have to do normal rites because that's what the stars deem, and it's what you do. And then the second half of the game is you doing the liberation rites, but going back across the world map in an easier way, and you've got a lot more freedom to what you can do at that point, or there's at least more choices that you can make.
Yeah, before the first liberation rites, you basically explore the entire world map once, and then eventually there's 7 rites in the game. 7 liberation rites in the game, and then for liberations 2 through 7, you can revisit locations you've already been to in a non-linear manner, and with some choice into which teams you face and what order you can revisit in. But I want to talk about the world map for a minute because it's again, we mentioned this, but it's really beautiful. You go through a variety of different climes here, but the forest area is a bunch of just stunning pinks and greens. The ocean area is like black and blue and beautiful. Like every time I would go to a new map, it was like I was looking into a jewelry box with my little caravan icon sort of rickety clacking along from map point to map point. It was really, really fun every time there was a new map that I could see in the first half of the game.
It's much less condensed than Bastion and Transistor are, because even though with Bastion, like you're teleporting to these different spots, they're all like kind of condensed once you get there. Like you follow this path through there and then you teleport back. But with this, it's much more expansive. I mean, the how you're looking at the stars and everything, and it seems like you're traveling by them, it gives it a much larger sense of place than the previous ones did. It's very similar to if you're a team that's like traveling around for an entire season of some sort of sport, like you're the Chicago Cubs, and so you're going to San Francisco to play the Giants, and then you're heading up to New York so you can play the Mets and things like that.
There aren't exactly home and away teams in Pyre, but different teams are like, by reading signs in the stars, go to specific places, and each site for the rites has a slightly different layout. There's one where the obstacles like even move around and sort of chase you a little bit. That was one in the Rogue Island area.
That was a weird one.
Yeah. And when you go into Sandra's right location inside the crystal ball, it's actually it was kind of hard for me to read the the obstacles because they looked like glyphs written on the ground, and they sometimes changed between rounds. but yeah, like the actual gameplay portion of the rights is a little bit like NES hockey, like NBA Jam. You're a team. It's a 3v3 team where you pass around a sort of a giant crystal ball and try to throw it or jam it into the opposing team's pyre. It's basically each team has a large flame that represents your, I don't know, you would probably call it a core if you were playing a MOBA or something, or a castle. Mm-hmm. But and in fact, I've thought about this a little bit. I think that there are multiple League of Legends or Dota 2 players in SuperGiant staff, because just the way you aim different moves and the way characters move around, I think that there is MOBA influence in sort of the basic movement and direction of characters and movesets. Because this feels a little like MOBA basketball, a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that.
I've never played those MOBAs, but I would totally believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, I had I don't know, sometimes fun, sometimes unfortunate run of playing Heroes of the Storm a lot for about 3 years. And I had my good times with it, but I think my MOBA career is basically over. The rights are really interesting because you eventually get a roster of, I think as many as 9 or 10 players. You start with only 3, but all of them play very differently. And the basics of movement in this game are people can walk around at different speeds, and they have but they also have a dash, a jump, and and different properties on their on what's called a cast, which is sort of like an attack if you're not holding the crystal ball, which is a charge for some characters, an explosion for one character, but usually sort of like a fireball kind of move. But if you're holding the crystal ball, you can still dash and jump, but you can't cast. And most of my strategy for this game was sort of let them get the ball first, try to attack their holder so that they would get knocked out for a while. If you get hit by a cast and can't defend against it, that character is out of the match for a few seconds. And then when I had a 3v1 or 3v2 advantage, have my most agile character dash and jump his way to the opponent's pyre. And I was pretty successful in the rights. I had one early loss, but then for the rest of the game, I basically could win or lose whether I chose to, at my own volition. Because unusually for a sports game, sometimes losing feels more appropriate than winning. Again, we've talked about this in the other episodes. All SuperGiant games, to a degree, are games about choice. Gameplay choices in designing how your character plays, to a couple impactful story choices to customize your own experience. And there's a lot of choice in Pyre, especially with liberation rights. But let's talk about characters a little bit first, because your team of exiles trying to make it back to the Commonwealth is called the Nightwings, and their raiments are a nice vivid red and blue. And you start out with 3 in addition to the reader Jodariel, Hedwyn, and Ruki. Jodariel is an imposing woman with demon horns. Hedwyn is a sort of relatively normal height human of sorts. And Ruki is a dog-like person, because the world of Pyre has at least 8 or 9 different races of sentient people. Right?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I was never really clear on with Jodariel in particular and a couple of other characters, demons aren't particularly a race, are they? They grow horns in the downside. That's what I interpreted. Is that how you...
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I believe demons are humans that have been in the downside a long time, and if you live in the downside, you may slowly start to grow horns. But there's at least 2 kinds of humans: nomads, which Hedwyn is, mm-hmm. and savages, which is what the Moon-Touched girl is. And but it's unclear if they are the same, if they are 2 castes of the same species, or if they're separate species. But the scribes, which are the sort of group of gods that are worshipped by the people of both the Commonwealth and the Downside, it appears that there's that the 8 scribes are each of a different race, and one of them is demon. So right, yeah. It's a whole sort of world and mythos that they've set up in in Pyre, and there's incredible diversity in the 9 or 10 characters that join your party.
Yeah, they're so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I like that there's diversity in personality and experience and how they move about the world. But I mean, every one of them plays pretty differently too. There might be a couple that are somewhat like Hedwyn and the Moon Girl, Vagabond Girl, I think, is like they're somewhat similar, but they branch out and they diverge as they go on, and all of them really are pretty different, and they feel pretty different to play.
Yeah, I think we were saying Moon Touch Girl or Moon Girl. Amusingly, when you meet this girl who's a stowaway on your caravan, she doesn't remember her name, but she remembers that it rhymes with what's the word that she compares it to? Is it day or play?
Is it gray?
It might
Gray,
be gray, yeah.
She remembers that it rhymes with gray. So the player has something like, I don't know, 12 names that rhyme with gray that they can choose between for Moon Girl. And I ended up landing on Shay. What did you guys name Moon Girl?
I went with Nay, and I don't know why. I was just... because one of the options is Bay, and I was like, I'm not going to take this seriously if I go for that. I was like, nah. So Nay the Nuisance was my Moon Touch Girl, and she was the complete opposite of a nuisance.
Mine, I chose Lay for mine, but thinking back on it, Alana, as you bring up Bay, I think it would have been really funny in the game, so you can just have Logan Cunningham at the start of each match going, Bay! Like, it could be real funny.
Yeah, and she gives herself a really unfortunate moniker, no matter what name you choose for her. I chose Shay, and she called herself Shay the Shoddy, which is not very flattering at all.
Yeah, she called herself Lay the Lonely.
Oh no! I mean, she is a little lonely, isn't she? But yeah,
each alliterative name is sadder than the last one. And the funny thing is, her deal is that she was. I don't want to say disturbed or schizophrenic because that's reading into it too much. But she sees visions and believes she speaks to the scribes, which are again the gods of this world. She was probably dismissed as a mentally ill person by people in the Commonwealth and then cast down to the downside. But upon interacting with her, she's clearly an unusual girl that sees visions and hears voices that may or may not be real. But is an extremely wholesome, friendly person who's an asset on your team.
She's a sweetheart, yeah.
Yeah, she's got moves too. Like she can jump.
Oh yeah, she was like a late game MVP for me. Yeah.
She's a little bit more agile than Hedwyn, but has a slight startup to her moves. Like she has like a slight charge time to her dashes and jumps. Yeah. But if you level her up a little bit, you can make her even faster or remove that charge time. Mm-hmm. Again, all these characters can level up and learn perks, and you can equip artifacts to them that improve their skills and stats. And the stats are unusual. There's hope is the stat is how quickly you recover back to the team after you've been hit. Glory is the damage stat essentially. Again, this is just a very unusual, very text flavorful kind of game. But again, your team has such a diversity of silhouettes and personalities. Jordariel is very large but slow. When you throw out her cast, it takes up a huge amount of space. So she's maybe more suitable as an attacking character or for defending your Pyre and not necessarily as a scorer. But she has a huge glory stat. So if you can get her to lumber the ball all the way to the Pyre, it'll deal like triple as much damage as Tizo, who is tiny and hugely agile, but does barely any damage at all when he takes it home. But
he does get better when you level him up, though. Like he can, by the end of my game, he was doing only 5 points less than Jordariel. So
yeah, me too. Yeah,
he's doing like 25.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he has a perk that boosts his glory a little bit, and you can probably equip him with something that increases his glory. But I think when I got to the end of the game, I had him dealing something like 22 because he was at 20, and then I got a bonus 2 from doing a bunch of reading in the in my downtime on the downside. But if Tizo's sort of special, unique artifact, like makes his stamina cost for dashing and jumping is down to 0, so giving you infinite dashes and infinite hover, which made him just completely untouchable because I had a pretty good grasp of evasive play with the really fast characters, and he was automatic points every round.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about just how great Tizo is in general.
My God.
He's a little they call him a drive imp. So he's this little kind of impish bird thing with horns because he's been down there and he's kind of grown horns, and he's the bomb. Like, he was my MVP basically.
He's sort of bird-like and bat-like with a very smiley sort of face and expressive eyes, but he only communicates in squeaks and chirps. But if you hover over the squeaks and chirps, it'll tell you how he's feeling, and he is just so adorable and happy all the time that I would be surprised if any of us have a different favorite character than Tizo.
No, I don't. I
Tizo's
love him.
Just the best.
He's the absolute best. Initially I didn't like using him in the raids, but yeah, once you start leveling him up, he was really consistently my best. And interestingly enough, I think he's the only one that isn't banished, isn't he? He lived in the downside. He's grown up in the downside, and
he was born in the downside. Yeah,
he was born in the downside, and is apparently even a descendant of one of the 8 scribes, Hagues, who is the imp one of the scribes. So yeah, he's just the best. I mean, his little bandage on his horn, his teeth, his little feet, his eyes, his squeaks, he's just so cute.
Fan demand for Tizo merch was so strong that even though they hadn't done plushies before, SuperGiant did release a Tizo plushie that you can find on their website.
Why is he not the mascot like Totoro is for Ghibli? Like, that would be so perfect.
He should be the SuperGiant logo. Absolutely, they should rename SuperGiant to like Super Tizo.
Oh. And I really like that. In RPGs, like having the Padre mascot is kind of a dime a dozen, but there's some good story beats with Tizo and his role. Tizo was with the old Nightwings because you discover that your Nightwings are basically imposters. They took on the role from people who, races and demons and those who participated in the rites previously. So he's been around for quite a while, and he reacts to characters, and characters have relationships with him that are not just like, I pet you, animal. It's like, you made sure that I didn't go back to the Commonwealth, and I am seeking vengeance. Like, Tizo's a big player.
Mm.
Yeah, let's talk about the old Nightwings a little bit. Because the first 3 characters in the Nightwings, or in addition to the reader, Jodariel, Hedwyn, and Ruki, were sort of directed to the caravan and to the old Nightwings gear and everything by a man named Sandalwood. And sort of you hear Sandalwood's a bit of a mysterious character for most of the game, but around the halfway point, or maybe just after the halfway point, you meet Sandalwood in person. He's a tree man, or called a sap, named Volfred Sandalwood. And Volfred was a member of the original Nightwings before you found their caravan abandoned. And there was the Nightwings had been an influential team in the downside for years and years and years, but the last incarnation of them, basically the liberation rites went really, really poorly. They were going to liberate a man named Oralek, but then he was shoved out of the way, and a different teammate jumped into the column of light to be sent up. But it didn't work because that person wasn't designated the winner. And so I forget her name, but so she died. Oralek accidentally tumbled off the mountain and was presumed dead. And Volfred was so depressed by it all that he abandoned the caravan in the desert. And he and Tizo, who was the imp driver of the caravan, went their separate ways. But then behind the scenes, Wolfred, like, definitely influenced by those events, decided that he needed to end the cycle of rights and liberation and basically just incite revolution in the Commonwealth and fix this broken system. So he, behind the scenes for many, many years, had agents in the downside and in the Commonwealth start planning this behind the scenes, and then recreated the Nightwings with these three new participants and a new reader to try and send as many sympathetic agents of his plan to the Commonwealth as possible. It's not exactly clear why, but towards the end of the game, the stars start disappearing from the sky, and it's clear that the rights are not going to be around much longer. Eventually, within a few more liberation rights, there will be no more people from the downside freed to the Commonwealth. And I think it's implied that the people in the Commonwealth realize that revolution is coming, and it's coming from the downside, so they need to cut them off entirely. And the person who the announcer for the rights, who presides over the rights, is a judge who's just called the voice for most of the game. But you eventually learn that he's not only the ruler of the Commonwealth, but he's a former member of the Nightwings named Brighton. And Brighton, or the judge, or the voice, or whomever you want to call him, gets increasingly hostile towards you, the reader, and you, the Nightwings, when he realizes that Wolfred is among you and is inciting revolution in the Commonwealth. So the game starts from being a presumed way to free as many people as you can, to a way to try and overthrow the Commonwealth, but with the knowledge that you won't be able to free your whole team. And eventually there are 7 liberation rights total. And so I think the absolute maximum number of your own team you can free is 7. And the ending changes depending on how many Nightwings are freed versus how many non-Nightwings are freed, is one of the elements that goes into the many, many possible endings you can get in Pyre. But let's talk about the other teams and the liberation rights a little bit, because I believe there's 10 teams total, including your own, the Nightwings. And the other teams, which are called triumvirates because they're always trios, are trying to send their own people to the liberation rights as well and have their own stories and struggles. What did you think of the others? Did you have maybe a favorite or one that you want to talk about? But other than the last one, because they're special.
Oh God, I'm trying to remember their names, but the one with the dog father and the son, the adopted...
The Fates.
The Fates, yeah. I really like them because there was a dynamic... I think it's one of the only teams initially, or at least later on, that has 2 characters who are named, because I think Sir Gilman was part of the Pyre Hearts, wasn't he, before he defected to your team? No, Bertrude is not part of the other team. Yeah, I just loved the father-son dynamic between them. And of course, the son has this relationship with, or at least the Moontouch girl, Nay. She has a lot of interactions with him. And I think their liberation right is maybe one of the more difficult ones as well.
It is. It's I'm going to call her Moon Girl because, again, she's Shay to me and Nay to you and Lay to Eva. But just to give you a taste of how the different endings can be affected in this game. I need to look up their names. It's the father, a human son with a dog father, the adopted father and son, of course, are the 2 sort of named characters in the Fates.
Yeah, it's Dalbert is the dog and Ulmer is the son.
Yes. Dalbert is a dog who's been around. Cur is the name of the species. Mm-hmm. Dalbert is a cur who has been in the downside for a long, long time, and he has an adoptive son named Albert, and Ulmer. And Ulmer loves and respects his adoptive father with all his heart. And when you interact with the Fates, Ulmer and Moon Girl have a bit of a connection. Like Moon Girl clearly wants to be friends. Ulmer is clearly a little flustered whenever she talks to him. And there's, some kind of connection there. And when you face a liberation right against the Fates, there's the undercurrent of Dalbert has maybe suffered the most of anyone down there and definitely deserves to finally be liberated. And this is where part of where choice comes in. I mean, for any reason you want, whether it's sympathy or character interaction or what have you, You, the player, the game doesn't end if you lose a rights. Whether it's liberation rights or regular rights, it's just like the standings will change, the amount of favor will change, and if you lose a liberation right, then someone from the other team is sent up to the Commonwealth instead of one of your teammates. And I think that the Fates are one of the most sympathetic other groups in the entire game, because like you see Dalbert and Almer's relationship, and you participate in the rights, and you might think, maybe I'll just throw this one and let Dalbert be liberated because he deserves it.
Yeah, I mean, but they're not liberating Dalbert, though, are they? That's not what they wanted to do in the end. He wanted his son to go free, right? Or
yes.
Yeah.
If you lose, whether on purpose or not, to the Fates in a liberation right, Dalbert says, I relinquish my chance for liberation and choose Almer instead. And Almer goes up, to the dismay of basically everyone. So this game throws you story curveballs in a lot of interesting ways. And at the very, very end of the game, after you complete 7 liberation rights, it'll give you a sort of where are they now of every major character in the game, and sort of giving you sort of personalized endings for every named character. And if Almer and Moon Girl both end up in the Commonwealth, both get liberated, they start a relationship. And I don't think it explicitly mentions if they get married or not, but they do get together in some way, which is, also satisfying, at least personally, because I love watching video games characters kiss, maybe to a weird degree.
Okay.
Yeah, throw that out.
Yeah, there's kind of a lot of these where the people are depending on where they ended up, it changes the story quite a bit, or maybe they end up together, like Wolfred and the bog crone Big Bertrude have a thing, and so they end up together. There's a possibility for Ruki and someone we hadn't mentioned yet, the Wings kind of harpy girl Pamitha can end up together in the Commonwealth. Yeah, so it changes depending on where exactly these characters end up at the end of the story. And I really like the fact that you're going to leave some people behind. And you have to make the difficult decision that some of your team, even if you win every single of the 7 final rights, you're still going to end up with 3 people, including or not including yourself, still stuck on the downside.
Right.
And one of the major ending conditions is whether Wolfred's planned revolution succeeds or not. And if you liberate 6 or 7 members of the Nightwings, then it succeeds, and bloodlessly and rather smoothly. If you liberate between 3 and 5 Nightwings, the revolution succeeds, but after a bloody conflict. And if you liberate 2 or fewer Nightwings, then the revolution fails and is somewhat crushed, and that's sort of the bad ending of the game. I got the normal ending because I for all of the liberation rights, I should say I won 5 of them deliberately, of course, and deliberately failed 2 of them. Because again, for sympathy reasons. One of them was Pamitha's sister Tamitha was up for liberation. She's in the team called, I think, the Essence, which is 3 flying harpy women, and Pamitha, who has a very bad relationship with Tamitha, wants nothing more than for her sister to go free. And like hearing Pamitha's wish in my wagon and Tamitha so determined to leave, I decided to let Tamitha win out of respect for my teammate. Like, maybe this will be better for Pamitha if I let Tamitha leave. I regret that decision a little bit because Tamitha's kind of a jerk and just and just goes straight back into battle with the Harpies fighting against the Commonwealth as soon as she's liberated again.
She does, yeah. But like,
yeah,
did you liberate Pamitha as well?
I did not.
I did not either.
Neither did I. Yeah.
No,
Wait, did we all liberate Tamitha and not Pamitha?
Yep.
Wow.
Wow.
Wait a second. Okay. I mentioned I liberated 5 and didn't liberate 2. The other one I didn't liberate was the final battle, Oralek.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize we were counting that one. Yeah, so I didn't do 3 then. Yeah. But we'll go back to that in a minute because I think that goes into like final game stuff. But yeah, like obviously you probably all got the same ending with Tamitha then, because it says that she sort of just becomes a bit of a recluse. Well, she did in my ending anyway, after the liberation succeeded and the Commonwealth became the, oh god, what's it called? Something of Sar or something.
I think it's like the Sarian nation or the nation of Sar.
That might be it, yeah. And she becomes a bit of a recluse, but it's suggested that she maybe misses her sister. And I'm like, damn it, why didn't I liberate both of them? Or why didn't I leave them both in the downside kind of thing? Like, yeah, it makes you really rethink some of your decisions.
Yeah, and I didn't know about the bloodless revolution versus the struggle revolution condition.
Oh,
I probably would not have liberated Tamitha if I knew about that, because I didn't know things like that, or the Moon Girl and Almer possibly hooking up, until doing some research after I beat the game. So like part of me wants to replay this game immediately and send up Almer and Moon Girl together. Don't liberate Tamitha. Definitely don't liberate that the leader of the of Chastity, the tree dude.
Oh, did you all accidentally liberate him too?
I did not. I lost. I lost by accident.
That was me too. Like I lost. Neither of my last rites losses were intentional. So I accidentally sent up Tamitha, which I was fine with. I thought that was a cool story beat. But I accidentally sent up, what the heck was his name? We were just talking about him this morning.
Oh my god. Tinderstaff. Is it Tinderstaff?
Yeah, something, yeah, Eve something Tinderstaff. Yeah, so I accidentally sent him up. But if you also accidentally...
That's his name.
Manly Tinderstaff, who is just the worst. He's just the worst, basically capitalist turned bootlicker down in the downside. But as Alana accidentally sent him up as well, I'm guessing you saw the part about what happened when he got there?
Yeah. F you, Manly.
I'm glad it doesn't work out for him. I don't remember who I was putting him up against at the time. Like it's probably but when I found out that this liberation rite was going to be against the Chastity and Tinderstaff, it's like, oh no, not you. I am going to beat your ass right now, and you are staying in the damn downside.
Yep.
So maybe I had slightly more determination than usual when I beat his ass at the liberation rites.
Oh yeah, definitely. I really wanted to beat him. I was so annoyed about it, but actually I think I'd had a rite with him like 2 rites beforehand as well, and there was a really interesting conversation between Volfred and me, and he was like, maybe you should play it cool with him and like get more information from him, and I didn't interpret that as losing. So then I accidentally lost this practice rite as well, and then Manly ended up spilling more information on his position and things, and I was like, okay. I was like, oh, that's really interesting, but then I lost to him again, and I was really annoyed about it. But yeah, what happens to Tinderstaff is, because the Commonwealth falls, he loses his position, and he tries to climb back up, and by bootlicking again and trying to get around the same way as he did in the downside, but this new age, these new rulers or whatever it is, they put him on trial multiple times and make him do community service, basically. So yeah,
if he remains in the downside, what happens is his very wealthy family in the new nation can basically bankrupts themselves on his behest to try and find new ways to bring him through the to bring him back to the top side, even though the rights are no longer anymore, and none of them work, and the family ends up bankrupt, and he ends up disgraced and living in the Waking Wood area for the rest of time, which was I was pretty satisfied by that. I accept this.
The only way it could have got better is if they threw them all down there, really, isn't it?
Oh my god, yeah, that was pretty satisfying. So I was upset when he won. Like something that this game does really well is whether you win or lose, you have a reaction to it. So you got when he won, I was upset, because it took me 3 tries to get Jodariel up to the surface because
Aw.
I accidentally put it on heightened and forgot about it. So
Oh,
at first, like,
was
so
that
at first I
was
was
that
just
with Titan Star or with just a regular difficulty setting?
oh, just a regular difficulty setting. And there were also a couple of Titan stars that I forgot to turn off. Yeah, so it just got really difficult. And I was not prepared, and I was like, wait a minute, let me look back. Did I? Oh, I did. So I set it back down to standard, and then the matches were close, but I still was winning. Um, I lost 4 times throughout this entire game, and 3 of them were to the essence because I am terrible at jumping.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean the saps like Manly and like Volfred are very good defensively because they can send out a sapling to provide like a second defensive aura, and they have a reflecting shield.
Yeah.
And you basically just have to, and they can teleport a little bit, but their walking speed is very slow. So you have to sort of be very agile and conscious about jumping around them because they can't jump themselves. And again, I played the whole game on standard difficulty. I did turn on Titan Stars on and off once or twice when the game specifically told me if you activate a Titan Star, this might affect the outcome.
Yeah.
Because one of the teams is the team full of crones worships one of the Titan beasts, and if you beat them while you activate the Titan Star of Eastlock, which is the beast they worship, then it gives them permanent stat downgrades for the whole rest of the game.
Yeah, I did that.
And that sounded interesting to me, so I did it too.
I didn't fight them again though.
I'm not sure I did either, but it was at least satisfying to beat them that way. And anyway, listeners, this game has different difficulty settings with a final hardest one called True Nightwing. If you, I think, after you beat the game once, but also there's our Titan Stars, which give you sort of extra conditions to make battles harder for you, but cause you to be awarded more experience afterwards. And it works like curses in Bastion or the heat system in Hades, to compare Pyre to other Supergiant games. But again, this game makes you feel bad about winning or good about losing sometimes in a way that's really fascinating. And I think losing even unimportant rights can be valuable for story reasons and dialogue reasons, like when Alana lost to Manly Tinderstaff. But also, if you want to choose who you fight for the rights, you can like check the standings of the teams and see what level of favor that they have, and like, okay, these 4 teams have favor in the 30s, and these 3 teams have favor of like 5. So I'm going to face one of those 4 for the liberation right. And if you like deliberately say beat one team and lose to another team in the regular season rights, then you can sort of manipulate who you face for the liberation right. And because they'll lose favor or gain favor based on when they face you. So that there's just so many little tricks and ideas that this game and nuances this game has that are so fun. And we mentioned that you can equip artifacts for different conditions, and there's a huge variety of those, of course. But each character has a unique artifact that only they can equip, that usually is particularly suited to their skills. And to do that, you have to win a set of 1-on-3 rights with that character by gazing into a special crystal ball in your caravan and interacting with a woman named Sandra. So I got the Sandra artifacts for I think every character except for the very first one I liberated because I didn't get to unlock Hedwin's trial before liberating him. And he was the one I liberated in the very first liberation rites. The 5 that I ended up liberating are the original 3: Hedwin, Jodariel, and Ruki, plus Moon Girl and Tizo. And the last one I liberated was Tizo because I felt like my MVP deserved the reward of experiencing the land above the downside for the first time. So that means I had to do the final liberation rite without Tizo, but I figured it out.
It's funny that we all, there are a lot of these decisions that we made similarly. Like, we all liberated Hedwin first. I mean, I liberated him first because I just thought that he was the least interesting from a gameplay and narrative perspective. I was like, and that he was looking for this woman. He was like, okay, or his this person who he was cavorting with, and why he was sent to the downside and whatever. I was like, yeah, he should be back together with her. So up you go. But
the crazy thing is you also unlock more biography and learn more about the people on your team as you level them up. So I never unlocked Hedwyn's little biography section because I liberated him early. And in his ending, you learn that the woman he was in love with was a harp, one of the winged people that are the enemies of the Commonwealth, and that his relationship with her might have been why he was sent to the downside. I'd have to look it up myself.
It is. Yeah. I had Hedwyn's biography before he went up, and I had his artifact as well. So I had, I set him up first because I'd essentially thought his arc was done, and he's the one who heals you as well. And I thought, like, for the generosity of being the person to put the trust in the reader first before anybody else was like, it felt appropriate for him to get freedom first for me.
Yeah, I liberated him first because I felt he was deserving.
Yeah, but I do agree with Eva. I think, like, because I'd already gotten the whole gist of his story, and because at this point I was using the Moontouch girl more than him, and she played fairly similarly to him, just with a charge up and faster. I just thought, like, no, I think I could do without him. And I missed him because he was like the head, he was like the center of the group. He was kind of not the leader necessarily, but he was the common sense. He was like the steady character.
Yeah, to use another sports analogy, he's sort of a glue guy, like someone who is not the head of the team, but sort of keeps everyone together.
Right.
Like a calm presence. But anyway, I don't think I had really unlocked anyone's story yet. I was leveling up the crew very, very evenly. Because even though I didn't know everything about Pyre, I knew that you can lose characters by sending them up. So I didn't want to put too many eggs into one character basket with leveling up my team. But I ended up releasing 5 and deliberately losing 2. I mentioned that I lost against Tamitha, but the other one I lost was the final encounter of the game deliberately because around the 3/4 mark or so, you meet Oralek. The person who was presumed dead and on the original Nightwings with Volfred, and he's reformed the Nightwings into a team called the True Nightwings. He's a demon like Jodariel, but his team is very, very good. It's I think it's him, a human that's a little bit like Hedwyn, and a very agile imp like Tizo, which feels like him trying to recreate the Nightwings of old. Like he has a vendetta against Volfred. He believes he was I think righteously believes that he was betrayed and denied his chance to return. So he's just very bitter and hateful. And no matter what the outcome is, the very final rights is against Oralek's True Nightwings team. And I played the game normally and even got ahead at first, but then decided partway that, you know, I think if anyone deserves to leave, it's him. So I just let him go through, but after he wins, in the dialogue with the reader afterwards, you sort of I chose to sort of have a heart to heart with him because you can choose to like argue with him or be silent or reach out to him, and I reached out to him, and he reconsidered his choice and offered to let you go free instead.
Okay, that's really interesting.
And that gave me a choice. I could accept and have the reader go free for the 7th rights, or decline and have Oralek go free, or accept the offer from Oralek and then have my designated player go free, right. who at this time was Big Barda for me. I'm sorry, Big Bertha. Big Barda is a New Gods character from the DC universe. That's my mistake.
That's so interesting.
I think she marries Mr. Miracle, I want to say, but that's some Jack Kirby nonsense that I have not read in a long, long time. But so like that final decision being your only chance to set the reader free, or have maybe the most sympathetic opponent Oralek go free, or have a final move to have one of your own go free, was like I sat there staring at the screen for 5 minutes, which was because I wasn't expecting this, and in every other previous right, I had sort of decided ahead of time what I wanted.
Right.
And this game is about silly basketball religious rites, but it has really thoughtful player choice attached. It's so impressive that I am so impressed that this game made me feel these feelings.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that you threw the match, because I didn't. I won the match, and I chose to liberate Sir Gilman at this point. But then, again, there's a similar thing happens in that I think it's the Celesta or the Lone Bard tells you, oh, you can do what you want. This is the final time. Because I think the pool, doesn't it? It takes a while to start up, essentially.
You can tell it's in its dying breaths.
Yeah. And so they say, like, this is the last time. What do you want to do, to Sir Gilman? And Sir Gilman very enthusiastically went, I want my reader to be liberated. And then I got that same choice. I got do I want to take it? Do I want to let Sir Gilman go, or do I want to let Oralek go? And at that point, I was like, okay, hang on a minute. Like, why did I beat Oralek when he's been through that much? Like, he was a bit of a jerk, definitely, to us, but kind of understandably, I think, given the circumstances with Volfred. So yeah, I chose to let Oralek go at this point, even though I'd won the right, and he went.
So I won this match against Oralek, and my designated person to go up was Volfred, and I decided to go with having him go up to the back up to the Commonwealth. I found it kind of weird that basically whatever, if you lose to him on purpose, or if you lose, if you were trying, or if you win, the decision is all the same. And I feel like we've been talking a lot of good on this game, but I'm not as, I left this game not as high up on it as, say, like Transistor or even Hades, really, because there's just, in this game, when you're playing another Supergiant game, everything feels extremely intentional. Everything feels very tied to each other. It feels very connected. And this is just my own experience with it, I didn't feel like this game led me to question some of the decisions that they're making, whereas in other games, I would say, why did you do that? And why did you do that? Because I thought that was a brilliant decision. And this is more of a, why did you do that? I don't think that was great for your narrative or gameplay mechanics.
This one has the messiest narrative of the 4 Supergiant games, I think, because there's so many different outcomes and some pieces that don't necessarily seem to fit. Like, would the game be that different if there was no Sir Gilman story or no Pamitha story? I don't think so.
I don't think so. No, I think Pamitha's maybe a little different, but because the liberation rite for the essence is so early, it's the second one most of the time. It kind of concluded really quickly for me, and she just kind of faded into the background. Yeah, like my choice for Sir Gilman was more just based on the fact that he'd banished himself to the downside, and I didn't feel like he deserved it at that point. I was kind of feeling a bit sympathetic for him at that point. But yeah, really, like his character, even Bertrude's character. Bertrude's a little bit more important because of her, the reason why she was banished. Again, she made ink for a printing press which Volfred was running. So, with literature being illegal, I think that's a big no-no. So yeah, I found that interesting. But yeah, it is the messiest, and I guess that's more of a consequence of the design of the game. I mean, I don't know how many different endings or pathways there are, but there's got to be a lot of words.
If you do, like, they did the math, and because there's just, like, every character arc can end at least 2 ways, probably closer to 5 or 6 ways, and there's something like 20 characters that are involved. I think the number of possible endings goes into the millions, but but really it's Bloodless Revolution, Battle Revolution, or Failed Revolution, and then individual character endings. And you click through character endings at the right before the credits roll, like an extremely more elaborate version of what happens when you beat a Fire Emblem or Suikoden game, and you get like a Where Are They Now segment for everyone that was on your team. And I really like this game, and I think maybe because I connected with this story and things like how beautiful the world map was, and the customizable dialogue. You do a big speech before write number 6, I think, where where you can click on individual lines of your speech and change them, and like and which lets you sort of choose the tone of the encouraging speech, and even like the final line you say is sort of becomes your team's motto at the end. Like having that kind of gameplay in a narrative segment, which is, a little bit like a visual novel or even a dating sim, was so cool to me, and isn't like anything in Bastion, Transistor, or Hades. I think I'm a little higher on this game than Eva is. I would, in fact, let's pose this question to the whole group. Where does Pyre rate for you in the whole Supergiant oeuvre? I'll go first. I think my favorite Supergiant game is still Hades. I was just so blown away by Hades playing it earlier this year that it made me more eager to revisit the rest of Supergiant Games' catalog when we were planning out the podcasts in December of this year, and playing all of them within a few months of each other made me love all 4 of them more. But I think Hades is still my favorite, and after that, it's just a morass. I don't know which finish second, third, or fourth, but this is crazy to me. Transistor might be 4th out of 4 for me.
How dare you?
Which is not harsh words. It's just how much I like each of those 3 very cool, unique games.
I was going to say, like, where do you score them all between like 85 and 100 is more of the question, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
I think the floor is 85 and the ceiling is Hades, like knocking on the door of a 96 out of 100 for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd say Pyre's my least favorite of the Supergiant games because I would say it's kind of on. I got as much out of Pyre as I did out of Bastion, but Bastion is also like less than half its length. Which, so that's just kind of like, and not to say that Pyre was not an interesting experience or that I regretted that time that I played it. But there's just more things. Bastion was on a smaller scale, but did more things really well within that smaller scale. And I feel like Pyre does the same amount of work, but over a longer span. I mean, this is much more close to an RPG in terms of length, in terms of leveling up things. But in terms of just how it is, like I said, I felt like it lacked consistency when compared to the other 3 Supergiant games. I think it also, while having pretty strong music, I think it's my least favorite of the 4. I'm sorry. That's still, once again, it's Darren Korb, so it's like, oh, it's the worst of Bowie's 1969 to 1979 output.
Yeah, right.
So it's still great. It's still really good, but just not reaching the heights that I think the other ones set. And just some of the gameplay decisions, the fact that once if your character doesn't have the ball, they just don't move. Like there's no AI to the characters, and they just stand there to be blown up. Super weird. And
that is weird, but like what I had to sort of figure out is have my slower defensive people with big auras. I would switch to them at the beginning and position them so they would be annoying for other people to deal with. And if the other player's ball carrier got around my point character, I would quickly switch to one of the people waiting in defense to try and take out the ball carrier. Like, again, maybe my love of real life sports carried over to my Pyre strategy a little bit in a way that I found really satisfying. But I mean, I didn't connect to the action of Transistor as easily as I connected to the action of Pyre, which factors into my feelings on this.
Right, and that's completely subjective because I felt like I felt differently. When I'm playing Transistor, it's one of my favorite systems. Period. I mean, that's one of my favorite games. Period. And so it's a lot of subjectivity, but there's just more. there's more there's more debris in this game, where I feel like the other Supergiant games for me, regardless of if they're 5 hours for Bastion, about 10 hours for Transistor, or 40 hours for Hades, had less kind of chaff. I think the word's chaff.
Yeah, separating the wheat from the chaff. The chaff is the useless start of the part of the wheat plant.
Yes, Pyre has more chaff, in my opinion.
I agree that Pyre is maybe the messiest of the four, and has what feels like the least purposeful structure, or it feels like the least intentionally designed, which I think is a comparison you made earlier, Eva. But I still love it. Alana, what are your feelings on how Pyre rates among the Supergiant Games collection?
So I wasn't going to rank them, but I'll rank them loosely. I'd say going from release order upwards, I would rank them. So my least favorite is Bastion, probably just because I think it's the easiest to grasp in 1 or 2 goes. Whereas, with the other games, you have to play multiple times, definitely. I mean, you can play Bastion multiple times and get more out of it, but I think the other 3 games reward you more for multiple playthroughs. And so that makes Pyre my second favourite. And the reason is, it is messy and it's got a lot of chaff and it's got a lot of debris, but I love characters. And I think the whole cast of Pyre are so good. I think that they're all so extremely interesting and they all bring something different to the table. I think I've also got a real affection for campfire pilgrimage stories, a group of people come together to do something, or they recount their lives and their stories together, and there's a bit of that with Pyre. It's also just weird. What other game is like Pyre in the world? And I don't think there's anything that's really comparable to it. And yeah, it is messy, and that final choice at the end threw me, and I liked it as a choice for if I won, but I think I would be a little bit hacked off if I deliberately threw the match and Oralek was suddenly like, oh no, you can go. I'm like, but where's that motivation come from? That feels really strange to me. So yeah, maybe I won't go in and lose all my liberation rights, or maybe I'll just always win that last one. I don't know.
My feeling is, after I did a little bit of research after beating the game to see what the other potential endings were, my feeling is now, I want to go and win every liberation right except for Almer, so I can have him and Moon Girl live happily ever after in the new nation. But the fact that I was thinking of how I wanted my next playthrough to go minutes after beating the game, sort of illustrates how much I liked the story here. And Alana, you're right. This game is so unique. I think the comparisons of NBA Jam and Oregon Trail, or my thoughts of it being the intersection of a sports game, a visual novel, and an RPG are fair comparisons, and that is so weird and unique that I appreciate Pyre a lot. And also, it goes back to me, when I think of this game, I think of my very first E3 and all of the happy memories associated with that. And so I and again, this is incredibly subjective, but I just feel weirdly close to Pyre. And now that I've thought about it for a few minutes, I think this is my second favorite. So my ranking is the same as Alana's, but with Transistor and Bastion flipped.
Yeah, and I just love we didn't really talk about the Book of Rites or the Scribes. I love reading that book and finding out more about... the book acts as a tutorial guide at certain points because it tells you about the rites in such a flowery way that just is so lovely to read through. And then you've got, one chapter each dedicated to one of the scribes, and they all tell you something different. Hagues tells you about how the scribes were formed, and one of the other ones tells you about the Titan stars, and one of the other ones tells you about every location in the downside, and it just adds a real rich texture. I mean, every Supergiant game has such a rich texture to its world, but Pyre's felt so earned, maybe because it was so wrapped up in the, literature's illegal and things like that, and that's, I don't know, that's the thing that always resonates with me really well.
And that book, which fills in as you encounter more people and learn more dialogue, fills in as you go, and it's about 100 pages of glossary and lore.
Oh, it's more.
That more than that. It's actually. I mean, it's like, I think it's something like 200 pages, but half of the pages are text and the other half are really beautiful art by Gen Z, which of course I want to unlock more of. But they're written like fables and parables and mythology in a way that just makes it a highly entertaining read, learning about the world of Pyre.
Yeah. I want to bring up something about the music as well, because actually, like, I do really like the soundtrack to this game. It doesn't top Transistors for me, I don't think. I mean, soundtrack, but not only is a lot of the ending stuff incidental, dependent on choices in that, but so is some of the music. And I mean, the most obvious one is the music that plays during the liberation rites, which I can't remember the name of. I think it's Never to Return. There are 9 versions of that song and split across 2 different albums. The Pyre soundtrack is 3 different albums. There's the standard one, the White Mandolin and the Black Lute, or something like that. And the Black album has all of the different versions of this song, and it's dependent on who you are facing in the liberation rite. So it changes the instrumentation, it changes the lyrics to match what team you're playing, and that's just so cool to me. And I love that. I think Darren said this was like the most complicated soundtrack to do, because every team's got their own theme, but then every character in the Nightwings has also got their own theme, and that instrumentation is carried through all of the pieces of music so well.
Geez, like he wrote his own version of Peter and the Wolf for this game, and
basically
with the wolf obviously being Rookie.
Yeah. And then the credits song, we all become one, or something like that. Something like that. I'm getting it confused with the opening song in Transistor. But that, again, the lyrics on that song change depending on who you liberate and who you don't. So it's less complicated because there's obviously 9 characters, and if you liberate yourself as well. None of us liberated the reader, did we?
I did not.
No, I didn't.
So we'll have to try that at some point. So yeah, like, it changes the lyrics in that as well. And yeah, there's just so much thought put into the craft of it that I can kind of forgive the messiness and the things that I don't like. And I think the gameplay is maybe the gameplay I found the most interesting. I love Transistor's like customization. I think that's incredible. Like, the detail on that is so good. And Bastion is super simple, and this is super simple as well. But yeah, I just think it all comes together to make something very, very beautiful for me. Like, I love Pyre so much, and it's got Tizo. So there you go. No other game in other game in these 4.
I'm not sure I like any character in Bastion or Transistor as much as Tizo. When we get into the gods and underworld denizens of Hades, maybe there's contenders, but Tizo is
on a different level.
A complete light.
Yeah. Oh.
I'm glad this game exists, and like I don't think it's a bad game by any means. I think it's a very interesting game, and I'm really glad that SuperGiant did something this weird and unique, and it has a lot of really cool ideas to it. I think one thing with this story is that whereas in other games it felt like the world was communicated through how you saw the characters talk about it or interact with it, and a lot of this came from like essentially data logs in the book, and they're well written and everything. But when you look at Transistor and how we learn a lot about the world from the upgrades and from like their characters' experiences, and so we learn what exactly a society thinks about a blue sky from a character rather than like from exposition, I guess. And I think that also kind of breaks up the pacing a bit. So I think
pacing is choppy and segmented in Pyre. Yeah, like you can really separate it into the space in between each liberation rite, and it feels uneven, especially in the second half of the game. That's undeniable.
Right. But and with that though, it's still a very interesting, very fascinating game, and the fact that it was like successful and critically successful as well for being just so out there and so strange is kind of a testament to just how interesting of a studio SuperGiant is, and the type of fan base and following that they've cultivated, that people are willing to go with them for this type of game.
Yeah, there's a real healthy culture around Supergiant, which I love. And again, going back to NoClip, as we have done on every episode, like they talked about, this was the game that, because they'd done so well with Transistor and Bastion, they felt like they could take the risk and they felt like they would have that support with it. And they largely did. Like, I think Pyre might be their least successful game in terms of critical and commercial success, which is, I can totally understand why. Like, it's not the easiest sell in the world, but I remember Darren Korb, and there's definitely been some interviews circling around recently as well, given current discussions. But Darren Korb said this was the game they introduced mandatory holiday in, the like vacation days, and because they had that space and they had that creative freedom, but also just because they were a good company and they're kind of, like, we talked about platonic ideals a couple of episodes ago, and they are.
I call them the platonic ideal of an indie studio.
And they are. Like, the culture surrounding Supergiant is wonderful. Like, I don't like to stan companies and things like that, but I have to admire, like, what they've done as a group. It's like an initial group of 7 people expanding to, there must be like 20 now, maybe 30. But yeah, like, you've got to admire everything that they've done, because they've just cultivated such a good culture and a good group of fans who respect their work, and they respect us in turn and respect their employees, which, what's not to celebrate about that, I suppose.
Speaking of fans, my new favorite internet community surrounding a game is that of Hades, because if you go to the forums or the subreddit of that game, it's like an equal balance of memes and jokes with really awesome gameplay videos with respectfully asked and answered questions, and in a way that just that warms my heart. Supergiant is the kind of studio that makes interesting game choices with all of their output, and cultivates a good work environment and a good fan environment that, again, I stand by the comment, platonic ideal of an indie game studio. And I am so glad that we celebrated them and played their games for this whole month, because Bastion, Transistor, and Pyre are all so unique and interesting in their own ways that there's no wrong answer to which is your favorite or which is the coolest, that like even more than usual when you're making subjective judgments about games within a series or games within a sphere, or choose your noun. I mean, I think all 3 of those games are so cool, and I'm glad I finally got around to playing Pyre, that game I did that E3 preview on more than 4 years ago. But I would say this marks the end of Supergiant month. That's not exactly the case. You'll see why in a second. I think I did mention it in the previous episode as well. But before we get to all the housekeeping, Alana and Eva, thank you so much for joining me on these episodes. I had so much fun playing these 3 games and talking about them with both of you, and I hope that it encourages listeners to revisit or play or at least think about these games a little bit, because they're all so interesting, thought-provoking video games that would not be the same if the story was told in a different medium.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I'd agree completely. Like, I'd never beaten a Supergiant game before Hades, and within a month and a half, I've now beaten all 4 of them. So, yeah, I've loved it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this, getting to, as you know, I had played Hades in October, and then I had played Bastion and Transistor previous to that. But getting to kind of play all 3 of these games within a few weeks span, I felt was really fruitful and really taught me a lot about their specific game design and how they've evolved as a studio, which has been really, really fulfilling, as well as getting to talk with 2 of my favorite games people about it.
Aww.
Oh, that's sweet. But we're not quite done talking about Supergiant's output either, and how they've evolved as a game studio. Because in January, we're doing an episode all about Hades, and to serve as, I don't know, an echo or an aftershock of the month of Supergiant Games. And also coming in January, we're doing a whole episode on Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is probably tied with Hades as my favorite games of 2020. So I'm going to be extra excited to talk about both of those. But before that happens, we still have one more episode left in December, and that is going to be Retro Encounter's traditional 2020 year in review. That'll come out either the 31st of December or the 1st of January. It depends on how challenging the edit is, I think. But we will definitely have a year in review coming. A year in review episode coming very soon, and there will probably be a little bit of Hades and Yakuza discussion in that episode as well.
You think?
I think. But also, I think in January we have another episode planned. 2 episodes, in fact, on Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings, and Lost Ocean, the GameCube classic RPG that had enough of a cult following for it to win our public poll that was attached to episode 250. So, Alana, I know you're going to be on those episodes with a panel TBD, but there will be some Baten Kaitos discussion on this podcast in January. We have February plans forming, but I'm not quite ready to share them with listeners yet. But I do want to share with the listeners our email, retro@rpgfan.com. That is the best way to reach us directly. I check that email every week. And RPG Fan also has message boards on rpgfan.com and a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a Twitter page, a Discord server, a Twitch channel, something streaming every day. And all of those are called RPG Fan or RPG Fancom. Please reach out to us. Give us whatever feedback you can stand. Oh, we also have a YouTube channel. Why isn't that in my list? Greg and the people in the video production team have been more active in YouTube in 2020 than any year previously, I would say. So, you know what? I should add YouTube to my list of things I share at the end of every episode. That's on me. My bad. But speaking of other things RPG Fan does, we also have 3 other fine podcasts: Random Encounter about randomness, Rhythm Encounter about RPG music, and Phoenix Edge, a weekly podcast mostly focused on current events. And those 3, along with Retro Encounter, are the RPG Fan Podcast Network. Please review all 4 of those shows on iTunes or Google Play or Spotify or however you are listening to us. We love feedback. Give us feedback. But if you want to give feedback to Eva or Alana directly, how do you do that? Let's ask them, starting with Alana.
So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Alana Hagues, or you can, if you're a part of the RPG Fan Discord, I am at Alana on there, or if you want to email me, you can do that. I am alanah@rpgfan.com.
And Eva.
You can find me on RPG Fan's general social media, Facebook and Twitter, or you can find me on Twitter and Instagram as @EvaLease.
And you can find me on Twitter most easily. I'm at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for dogs other times. I'm also on RPG Fans Discord as Monsoon Mike. Or you can look into the stars, shout the word frogs 7 times, and I will probably wake up bolt upright with a nightmare about frogs. Listeners, thank you, good night, and good luck with all those frogs.
When the stars align, the rights shall come to bear. Illuminate the signs, the exiles shall